Hello friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop. We have yet another fiddle. This looks to be a pretty decent old fiddle. It's a Guarnarius copy. Joseph Guarnarius, I don't know how to pronounce that. That's how I pronounce it. It says it's made in Austria. Can I see a date in there? Let me see. No, it just says copy of a Joseph Guarnarius. You know, it looks to be in pretty good shape. I don't see anything really wrong with it. Just needs cleaning up. You know, it's just real kind of grungy looking. It's had the old gut strings on it. And gut strings are great, but they're crazy expensive these days. Maybe I don't have the right source. And it's been a long time since I looked them up, so you could jump on me if you want to. I haven't looked up gut strings in a long time. But I remember somewhere when I was looking them up a long time ago, they were in the $200 range for a set of them. So maybe I was looking at the wrong source. Needless to say, we're not going to be putting gut strings on this. We're going to set it up with the strings that I typically set them up with, which is a nylon core with a steel wrapping, and gives them a good, nice, mellow sound. I don't see very much work that needs to be done on this other than cleanup. Everything really looks pretty darn good. This is maybe a hair low, but just barely low. And if it is a little low, we can work with that. It's be nice if it was a little higher. I don't see a sound post in it, and there's no sound post rattling around, so we'll need to put in a sound post, but that's a minor thing. The old bow that came with it, might have been worth a lot of money, but unfortunately it's missing the button off adjuster here, and it's been left real tight. And that old bow is straightened out, and that's not good. That's not the way they should be handled. So I'm going to see what I can do about fixing this and see if we can get the tension off of this. Maybe the customer will want the bow rehaired as well. I'm not much about putting the frogs back on, the leather back on here and stuff. I've never really done much of that, but I'm sure I could if we had to. The bow's in kind of a bad shape, but I have a feeling this old bow might have been worth some real money. As a matter of fact, sometimes these old bows are worth more than the fiddles. This came in the old coffin case. I've seen a million of these over the years. All right, maybe not a million, but probably 1,000. Maybe not even that many, but a lot of them. Let's put it that way. They all look pretty much the same. As far as I'm concerned, this old coffin case, if I owned it, my mom was fond of saying, if I owned that, I would put a nickel in it. Actually, she said I would tape a nickel in that, and I would throw it away. And I'd say, every time I'd fall for it and say, how come? She'd say, so that way if some kid would find it, they won't be disappointed. They'd have a nickel. That's about the way I feel about these cases. These particular cases are really not very good. I mean, for the day, for the time, yeah, they were probably the best around. But anymore, these things, they're not the way to go. The fiddle sits in there real loose, it flops around, it bangs around, it just doesn't hold the fiddle secure. It doesn't cradle it, if you will. It just leaves it in there, flops around. Same way with the bow. The bow lays in there and kind of flops around. It's just not a very good case if you want to protect your violin and your bow. So when I send this back to them, I will be bubble wrapping the inside as well as everything so that it doesn't bounce around. And I would highly recommend to the customer that they get a new case, and I can get a case also. I sell cases that I think are really good in the, I don't know, $50 to $75 range, and they're really nice cases, very plush on the inside. They're on the cheap side of cases as far as that goes, but they're very good compared to that. Anyway, here we go. We're going to start cleaning this thing up and setting it up and see where it takes us. First thing we're going to do is get rid of all this string mess that's here. There is absolutely no value to any of this, so we're just basically getting rid of it. I don't know if there's a sentimental attachment to this violin or not. It came from Iowa, by the way. Just because there often is a sentimental attachment to these old violins, even though I don't think there's any value to this, I am going to just roll up what's left of these strings, put them back in the case, ship it back to the customer. Like I said, there's really no value there. There's nothing worth saving. It may be an old family heirloom or something, and in that case, then they may want to save this. Who knows? This string, somebody was being thrifty. They tied a knot in that string, although they didn't cut off the loose end. The tuning pegs up here look pretty good, really. They look pretty decent shape. We're going to get rid of this whole mess off the back here. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and put the adjustable tailpiece that I have on here, because by the time I add adjusters to this, the tailpiece with the adjusters built in runs about the same price, and I don't really care for these with the adjusters on them. The one that has the adjusters built in, I think, is much more efficient and much nicer. So anyway, that's where we're headed. We're going to put in a different tailpiece, I believe. I was able to get the bow apart. Basically, I just took a pliers and latched onto the tail end of that and unscrewed it, and it came right out, no problem. The frog here isn't matched up real well. You can see the silver doesn't butt up tight against there, and there's a little gap here. So if we decide to rehair this, and I think we will, then we'll try to repair all that and make it look real good. The first thing I'm going to do, because there's just so much creep and crud all over this thing, I'm going to just literally take a damp paper towel, one of those soft blue ones, and I'm going to just wipe everything down and just see how much dirt we can get off of it. I can't even tell. This may be mold or mildew or something on here. I'm not really sure what it is, but we'll just wipe it all down and clean it up. It's actually in pretty darn good shape. I don't really see anything really wrong. Let's just see how high this is. Yeah, it's just barely 3/4 of an inch, a little bit, just a hair maybe over 3/4 of an inch. I'd like to see it up a little more, like 7/8. 3/4 will work though. The tail pin is a cheap tail pin, a button that's there, and it doesn't fit the hole very well. It's pretty loose. So we'll be making a new one of those. We'll put this in the case. The finish on it's very dull. I think the first thing I'm going to try is just take it to my buffing wheel and just buff just the surfaces, the two surfaces a little bit, and see if it brightens it up. If that doesn't do anything, then I think I'll just wipe it down with linseed oil. I'll probably wipe it down with linseed oil anyway, but I thought I'd try buffing it first to see if we can, shine it up a little bit before I do the linseed oil, just to see if it works. Well, the buffing wheel worked real good in some places, but there's a lot of places, like right in here, where you can't get in with the buffing wheel very well, and around here, there's just places where it's real dull. It worked where it worked, but it just isn't working everywhere. The buffing wheel, you got to be careful, because you can grab a corner like this and break it out or something like that, so you got to be very careful. So I'm going to work on some hand methods here and see if I can come up with anything else to buff this out with and clean it all up and make it look nice like this varnish looks. It looks much better here. And then we'll have to touch up all these little spots that are white. I did a test on this one spot right here that was really dull, and you can see it cleaned it up a lot. What I did was I used the semi-chrome polish. This is that stuff that Randy Schardiger touts all the time, and I used it with a damp cloth. It's a paper towel, but these are really soft. Just a little dab on here like that. Here's a real dull area right here that you can see, I believe, and we'll see if we can clean up this dull area right here. I think you can see a big difference in the way that looks there now. Much cleaner looking. So we're just going to do that. I'm not going to film all this. I'm just going to go through the whole thing and just clean up all these real dull, dried up spots and buff them out, and bring you back when we're finished. Now I'm taking the Renaissance wax and I'm going over it again, rubbing it pretty hard. I think this kind of cleans up the semi-chrome polish. That does a good job, but it kind of leaves a little bit of a residue in places, and you rub it out, you get rid of most of it. But this here kind of cleans that and leaves a nice waxy shine, boy. That's looking good there now. Wow. So we still got a lot of touch-up to do, and maybe I should have done the touch-up first. I may regret doing this, especially with the wax part. I think we'll be all right. The problem was it was so nasty, it was hard to see what needed to be touched up. Man, that's looking like $1 million on the finish itself. It's just as slick now, just as smooth, and it's really slick compared to this end here that I haven't done yet. Really rubbing it in hard. Try to, buff it out and make it nice. You got to keep your cloth turned a lot. Wow, I'm liking that a lot. I don't know if you can see how pretty that looks now, minus the scratches. If you can just look at the surface and look how nice that is. It's really looking nice. See how dull the sides are. They're relatively shiny, but they're dull. So now we'll work on the sides a little bit and see if we can clean them up. Here's kind of a before. See how dull that is still? It's sort of nice, but it's dull. And then That's after cleaning it up. It's a lot shinier, cleaner looking. And so we'll work on this side now. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to try this same process on this chin rest. You can see how dull it is. I think it's Bakelite. I imagine it's Bakelite plastic, but it's really dull. It's even got a couple of bumps on it, like you can see these big bumps on here, and I don't know what those bumps are. Really don't know what that is. I'm going to see if I can just pop those little bumps off of there with the plane. Yep, looks like they're going to pop off. Looks like it's almost like a rosin or something. Yeah, that came off. There's another bump here that's not as pronounced, and it may just be part of the plastic. I can't tell. Just scrape it a little bit. A little bit of a junk right in there. Just scrape them lightly. Now I'm going to take the semi-chrome polish and polish this up, and just to see what happens. I truly don't know. I've never tried it before, but I have a feeling it's going to make this look pretty nice. I don't think it could hurt it any because it's pretty darn dull looking. It didn't shine it up too much, but it's nice. It doesn't look bad. Now I think I'll take a little bit of the Renaissance wax and go over that, see if that improves it at all. It looks nice. It looks better. Now let's just see if the Renaissance wax will bring it to a shine. I don't know. It doesn't look like it's going to, but like I said, it ain't going to hurt it. Well, it looks much, much nicer. I don't know how much that'll show up in the video, but in person, it just looks much cleaner. Looks almost like new now. As I said, it may have been a mistake to do all the buffing and polishing before we try to touch this up, but we won't know until I try it here. Like I said, you couldn't even see the spots that needed to be touched up. It was so dull looking. This leather dye does seem to penetrate pretty well. This is a light brown leather dye that has a lot of red in it, so I think it's going to match this top really good. It's not going to make them go away for sure, but I think it'll tone them down, tone the colors down a lot. Light looking spots. There's lots of light places on the edges, and we're just going to touch them up too. See, that looks a lot better than the white. And then there's all kinds of scratches on the edges like this that we'll just go through and touch up a little bit. Again, it isn't going to make them perfect. The idea is just to tone them down so they're not so obvious. You can see they look a lot better. You can still see them, but they just don't look as obvious. And now here's a couple of big white spots there. There's the before, and there's the after, not nearly so noticeable. And I've said it many times before, my goal is not to make them look like brand new. My goal is to make them look like they've been cared for, versus an old instrument that's just been beat around. Alright, we'll see what we can do with some of the back here. I don't know that this is going to go away at all, but we might help it a little. There's so many of them, so many spots on this. Again, all we're doing is toning them down a little bit. Just going to broadcast it across here and wipe it back off. It's not doing a lot. It's really not doing all that much. Not hurting it, but it just isn't doing all that much. I'd say it looks better, it just doesn't look great. About ready to start putting the strings back on her and seeing what she looks like. I'm going to make the tail pen for this. The first thing I'm going to do is just slightly ream this, and I'm only doing it to make sure that it's round. I'm not trying to expand the size of the hole. I'm just trying to clean up the hole, then see how far in the pin goes, the new pin. Might add that I think my supplier has cheapened up their pins. These are real nice end pins. They look nice, the little eye there and inlay and stuff. But I don't think this wood is pure ebony like it used to be. I think it's maybe that African blackwood or something like that. It just doesn't look like the same kind of ebony that we used to get. Everybody's cutting costs. What I do here, and this probably seems like it's just nuts, but it works good for me. I go around and scrape this, and then I put it back in the hole. I rotate it like this, and I can see the high spots because they'll show up as a shiny spot. And then I go back around and I scrape off all the shiny spots. Right now they're just down on the small end, so that means that it's not even getting up to the big end yet, and it's rubbing all the way around, it looks like. But if you do this like this, it really makes it fit the hole tight. The pin won't come out once you get it in there. It's a little bit of extra work, and I might even say it's a little anal retentive, but it works really good. Each time you put it in there, it goes in a little bit further, and then you just rotate it, and you can see where it's really doing the rubbing. I just kept scraping it down, spinning it, scraping it down, and it fit in there just as tight as it can fit. I don't think you could pull that out of there. It's absolutely snug tight. I mean, it won't come, you know. So it's on there. That last little bit, it's probably a 32nd of an inch from going, and then I just kind of tap it like that, and it just goes in real snug tight. So that's fixed. Now we have a place to hang the tailpiece. We've got the tailpiece here. I like to look at these and see how they're laying, and I like to see them go past the edge of this about a 1/16 of an inch that way. This one looks a little bit snug, so I'm going to loosen it up just a teeny bit. I believe that'll work right there. Now we need to make a bridge and a sound post. We'll start with the bridge because I like to get the bridge in place, just barely sitting there, and then put the sound post in. So that's where we're headed. So we've got a unfitted bridge. It's very thick, very heavy. And we'll start by trying to make the feet fit fairly close. What I do is lay it on there about where I believe it's going to go, hold it there, and then I take a pencil and just kind of follow the contour at approximately the height I think needs to come off of it. And that just gives me a ballpark idea. That's not going to get it perfect by any stretch, but that gets you in the ballpark. Then I take a very sharp chisel, and these are really sharp, put a soft piece of wood under it, and I chisel that off. And you got to chisel just a tiny bit at a time, otherwise you'll split it and break it and bust the foot. Nice and thin, nice and thin. That's what you're going for. Well, I did what I said I wasn't going to do. I broke the foot. This one goes in the trash. I got in a little bit of a hurry there, trying to get too aggressive. You have to just barely take any off at a time to keep from breaking that. So I'm not going to film the rest of that just because it's a jinx. Well, I won't lie to you, I actually broke a second one of these. So after I broke the second one, I decided I better sharpen my chisel. So I sharpened the chisel up razor sharp again, and it just cut like butter then. So that made all the difference in the world. And so therefore, before I start to thin this bridge down, I'm going to sharpen my little plane too and make sure it's really sharp. So now I will just plane that bridge down nice and thin. And as always, you can only go one direction. The direction I started, it didn't like. It likes this 45 direction here. The problem with that is you have to be careful when you go over this little tongue because you'll break it off real easy. So I try to go straight across that tongue whenever I do the tongue. You can see how much thinner it is on this side than it is on this side. And I'll get the whole thing that thin or thinner when I'm done. Some of these pieces just don't want to be carved any direction except one direction. This one happens to be one of those. It's trying to carve at different angles, and it only wants to go from this side this way. And that's just the grain of the wood, the way the wood grew, and quarter it a little bit, but you can't really go the opposite direction. Okay, we've got her significantly lightened up there, that's for sure. A nice light bridge gives you a much better sound than a big heavy clunky one. Cut the strings on it very lightly. They have almost no tension on them. I've got the bridge approximately where it's going to go. Now I'm going to take my little tool and set it inside and try to measure the height of the sound post. I do that by just eyeballing where I believe the sound post needs to go. Once I get it there, then I just lock this down and then carefully try to get it out of there. And that should give me approximately the length of the sound post. So we'll go cut a sound post and see what we've got. Alright, I have the sound post. Actually, it's a little tight to fit through the F-hole there. That F-hole's a little smaller than a lot I've seen. Pretty tiny F-hole. It'll go, but just barely. I don't know if the sound post is going to be the right length, though. I have a feeling it's going to be too long. But now that I get it in there, it don't feel like it. Well, I have to be honest. The sound post is just a little short. I don't know how it got short because I measured it, cut it off a little long even. It's about, I don't know, it's not as bad as it looks, I guess, to me, but it's about right in here. I was hoping it would be right about there. It's not too bad. I don't know if I can move it a little bit. Maybe it got jammed in a little. Oops, it fell over, of course. Well, we'll start again. Well, we've got the sound post in there off camera. I didn't show it, but we got her in there. You can see it. It's all tuned up and ready to go. I think it's going to be a real nice fiddle. It's at the end of a long, hard day. I'm going to let her set overnight and just see how she stretches out and make sure everything's good and solid. And then tomorrow we'll give her a play. It's early the next morning, and I have just touched up the tuning on this old violin. Got a very nice, even sound across there. So we'll see what it sounds like. For all of those out there who are using this type of old fiddle case with their old fiddles, I want to show you what I'm talking about when I tell you you really should tape a nickel to this and throw it away. That way if some kid finds it, he won't be disappointed. They don't have any good way of holding anything. Absolutely everything in here is loose and flopping around. This part here is metal and it holds your bow. It goes up under here. Your bow can flop around in here and this metal can cut your hair. This part here is loose. This is where the frog of the bow goes through and it just hangs here and flops around. So it's flopping down on your violin all the time. Your violin does not fit in here tight. Let me show you what I'm talking about. You lay it in here. It's reasonably fitted, but look how much play there is here. There's just this much play, and especially if you're going to ship a violin and you ship it in a case like this, it's just banging around all the time. And it's just the reason that about 90% of old violins in these kinds of cases are a wreck. So in my opinion, get rid of these cases. I mean, hang on to them for nostalgia, for for sentimental reasons and that sort of thing. I understand the fact that this was Grandpa's old case. Hang on to it, don't throw it away, but get you a decent case for your violin, and your violin will last much longer. Now, I'll show you what a decent case looks like. All right, this is what a more modern case looks like, and you can pay a lot of money for these, or you can buy the cheaper ones, and the cheaper ones are still far better than those old wooden coffin cases. This one's kind of in the middle of the road in terms of expense. I don't know, it probably cost me, I'm sure it cost me less than $100. I just don't know exactly what it cost, I don't remember. Anyway, it's got this nice cover for your violin. Your violin is cradled inside of padding here, and it doesn't even hardly move at all. And it's got a little strap to hold your violin in and hold it in there real nice. It's got plenty of compartments, space. The bows are held in with this type of an arrangement. You slide your bow up inside of here, and then you twist this and hold the bow, and your hair goes on one side and the frog goes on the other side, or the stick goes on the other side. Anyway, these are just much, much nicer cases, and it really protects your instrument. This was my grandfather's old violin, and it was in a case very similar. As a matter of fact, it was in a case that was much better than the case I just showed you, but it wasn't in a good enough case in my opinion. That's why I bought this case and put this violin in here many years ago. It just gives them much, much better protection. My thought is that folks that are not, really into music, the non-musician type people just don't understand how important a case is to keeping an old instrument in top quality shape. So anyway, that's my spiel on that. I just wanted to show you the difference because there is a significant difference. The customer wants this bow rehaired. You can almost use the hair that's on it. It's just that it was left strung tight and the hair is kind of stretched. I think we'd just be better off putting new hair on it. Plus it's kind of, I don't know, dried out and greasy looking, and there's not a lot of hair left. So for all those reasons, we're going to go ahead and replace the hair. I'm hoping this one will come apart easy. I've already pulled the broken screw out. The screw is broken on this in terms of the knob. The handle is gone. Anyway, I've just went ahead and took that out. This does appear like it's loose, so it may come apart fairly easy. Taking the ferrule off first. That's the part that I always forget to put back on before I put the hair in here. So I got to remember that so I don't screw that up. Should be able to slide this pearl cover out, though that's not always easy. It's actually easier if I would have left the screw in here, but because that screw was so messed up, I was trying to get it out of there. I think I can put it back in there temporarily, maybe. Just use it like that temporarily. Help hold it in place while I'm working on it. There's something filled crack right here that's probably not supposed to be there. I don't know what's going on here. Looks like there's some kind of metal or something bent up right in this area. I'm going to see if I can press it all out of there. It looks like it's coming very slowly. I'm just using the end of the X-Acto blade to kind of press lightly. Actually, I'm pressing pretty hard, but I'm trying to be ginger about it. It's coming, but very slowly. There's a I don't know if that's the spreader there that's in there, and maybe it's glued to the other part, because I don't know. It's hard to tell. I hate to pry anything apart there until I know. Yep, came out finally. Yeah, it's got, I'm not really familiar with the metal slide like that. This has always been ebony on the ones I've worked on. This has got a little tiny metal slide folded around the pearl. Haven't really seen that before, at least on the few bows that I've rehaired. And I haven't rehaired a ton of bows. I've probably rehaired 50 in my whole career, if that. I'm not sure I've done that many. Quite a few though. Like I've said before, rehairing bows is not my specialty. I can accomplish the feat. Thought maybe I could just pull that out. What I generally do at this point, or somewhere in the process, is I just cut the hair at both ends. Just makes it easier. That way this hair, I can pull it back up out of my way. Look at the little block. I would like to salvage the little blocks if possible. Sometimes you can reuse them and sometimes you can't. If they come out in good shape, then a lot of times you can reuse them. This one looks like it's really crammed down in there with a lot of force, it looks like, so I doubt this one's going to be reusable. Trying to just find a way to get under it to pick it up, but it's everything I touch is chipping on it, where you can see where they've pressed it down in there really hard, which I'm not knocking that. That's what you have to do sometimes, but that broke the fibers in the wood when it was pressed down in there. You got to be careful that you don't pry against things. Like I can't just reach in there and pry against this plastic because it'll break this plastic. This is possibly ivory. I'm not really sure. To be honest, I don't know. At first I thought it was for sure ivory, but I believe it's a plastic. The way they've got it curled here and everything, I'm pretty sure it's plastic, but I don't know for sure. But you got to be careful no matter what it is, because if you start prying against it real hard, you'll break it. So it doesn't look like it's going to come out in one piece for sure. Sometimes you can pull on the hair and pry on the back of it and get it to come out, and that's what I'm trying right now, although I think I'm breaking the hair off more than I'm getting it out of there. It's still just fighting me. It's coming though. There it is. It popped out. I doubt we'll reuse that piece, but we'll see. It's a possibility. And now I'm just reaching down in there and see if there's any glue and stuff that I can clean out. Sometimes they use glue on these, and it looks like there's been a little bit used maybe. Cleaning off this back wall, because I can tell there's something on it. Just dirt, I guess, just caked in there over the years. Cleaning out the little pockets of the slide. It appears to be pretty good shape now. And this piece appears to be original. I believe that's the way it was originally made, so I believe that's the way it's going to be. I'm just trying to see if I can get it to go back in all the way, because it wasn't in all the way before, and if it won't go in all the way when there's no hair in there, it'll never go in there all the way later. It's going in there all the way now. Now the only problem with that is I got to get it back out again. Once it goes in a hurry. Okay, that end's good now. We'll move to the other end. All right, the same thing basically happens at this other end. We have to get this little block of wood that's wedged in here. And again, often this has got some glue on it too, so sometimes they just pop right out, other times it's quite a process. And again, you gotta be careful, because boy, you can sure break a lot of stuff here. Damage more than you're fixing. Just trying to get under it a little bit to see if it'll lift. Doesn't seem like it wants to. Those ones that come out real easy are a gift, because you can usually reuse them again, and saves a little bit of trouble making a new part there. It's loose, I can see it moving, but it's just not coming out all the way. Whoever did it did a nice job. They got it in there tight, did a real nice job. It's chipping up pretty bad. Once again, you cannot get in there very deep and start prying. Something will break. You have to stay right very shallow when you pry on this stuff, so that you're keeping your force to a minimal. There it is. Came out. And you can see there's just a knot on the end of it there. That's what held it down in there. That cavity's pretty clean looking. Just getting any old dirt and residue off the sides and bottom there. Okay, we'll start back with the hair. I only use real horsehair for rehairing bows. I've never used synthetic. When you buy it, it comes with this already tied up and a knot there and glued on the end. The problem is that's way too stiff and too big to fit into the holes you need to fit it into. So you have to retie it and get rid of all this stuff here. Also, this is just too much hair to put into a bow. They give you a little extra. You have to separate it out a little bit and just use your judgment in terms of what you think you can fit into your bow. And so I have put the whole hank in a bow before. It does fit if you force it, but it's a lot of work. Better off to thin it down just a little bit and kind of spread it out there and see what you think could fit, Again, those of you that rehair bows professionally, I make no claims. I'm not telling you this is how you rehair a bow. I'm not doing that. All I'm showing you is this is what I do. I'm not saying it's the best. by any stretch, so all the negative comments and things, you know, I just assume you keep them to yourself. I make no claims about being a good bow rehair person. Still quite a bit of hair there, and we're going to tie that up and see what we can do about putting her in this bow. And once again, the disclaimer, this is just how I do it. I've got a plastic little clip here. This just came off of one of those clothes hanger type deals that you buy in the store when you get clothes. And just break those off. And I'm just clipping it onto the loose hair here that I'm not going to tie, and I'm hanging it there just to keep that hair out of my way. I have a thimble full of thread here. You know, you need a good strong thread. This is a all-purpose thread that's a little stronger than the sum of it. Wish I had something slightly bigger. I don't know where to really buy it though, so this is fine. A little bit fine, but that just helps it get in the frog better. Tying this, I use the method that I used to tie bowstrings. I used to tie my own bowstrings and have tied them for years because I used to compete in archery. Tying the serving on a bowstring is very similar to what I do here in the knots that I use. I start off with just a slip knot that I'm tying there right behind the hard part of that where the glue is and stuff. Then I take a loop with my fingers and I loop it back. You know, I got my fingers in the loop here. I don't know if you can see this because the thread is so fine. And then I wrap at least 10 wraps back through the loop, over the loop like this, and back through the hole. Try to keep those relatively in line where they're not getting all over the top of each other. Just makes it easier. I have lost count, but I'm gonna just go by sight and figure out if I've got enough there. Approximately 10 times, a little more, a little less will work. And I think that should be sufficient. Then what I do is I take, and now this is all slid down too, by the way, which I didn't want. The slip knot is slid down. I take the loose end of the thread and I hang it back through my vise here so that it's there. And I like to take the other end of the thread, the short of the slip knot, and bring it back through to the other way. You don't have to do that, but I just been doing that lately and it seems to work really good. And the slip knot keeps moving on me today. Then you just take this and start wrapping it back around over the top of itself. Try to keep the slip knot from moving. So I'm wrapping it back over both ends of the thread, if it makes any sense to you. And I wrap it, and I do try to keep the wraps from going over the top of one another. It's tedious at best, and eventually you'll come back to where there's nothing else to wrap. Then I'm trying to slide it back up to the end of the hair here because it keeps sliding down on me today, which doesn't always happen, but it's happening today. Of course, it's on camera, that's why. Now I'm going to take that long end of the thread here, and I'm pulling the loose stuff back underneath. I'm going to hold on to the short end of the thread, pull the loose end back through there, and you can see it's starting to tighten up on itself. Again, I'm moving the knot back to the end of the hair where I want it and pulling on both ends of the thread. And you got to pull good and tight, but you pull too tight, you're going to break your thread, you know. So you got to judge all that. And you just keep working it till you get it as tight as you can get it. And that's about it right there. Then once you get it tight like that, what I do, and you don't need to do this either, but I've just been doing it lately, is I go ahead and tie a knot back ends of these two strings here and try to tie like a square knot type deal in that. That just gives you a little bit extra security. It doesn't really have to be done. And then I cut these off pretty close to the knot. Alright, once you get that done, then you can take it out of your vise and you got to cut the hair off just past your knot. The way I'm going to attempt to do that right now is with my X-Acto knife, and I'm going to slice it off right here. It does a pretty nice job just cutting it right off. Then if you've got some good sharp scissors, you can just keep trimming that and get it fairly short, which is what I am going to do. Off camera, I just took my barber scissors, these little scissors right here, and just kept trimming the edges till I got it real close to the knot. Still holding this with a death grip here so that nothing starts pulling through. And now I'm going to coat the whole knot and the end, especially the ends of the hair, because you want to swell those up. Take a little torch here and you just start touching the end of the hair, and it starts boiling the glue, and it will swell the ends of those hairs up. You can see how it's kind of turned them brown there, and it's swelled the ends of them up. Then I just take and touch the rest of that glue like that, and get rid of the excess, and that'll dry really fast. I'm just going to put just a tiny bit more glue right on the very ends. and maybe just a teeny bit more heat. And that way you have a very small knot right at the very end of the hair. And it shouldn't come loose. I've never had one come loose, knock on wood. I should never say anything like that on video. Okay, now that we've got this end done, we'll move. Different people do it different ways. A lot of people start with the frog end. I start with the tip end, and it's just the way I learned. I learned it from a book years and years ago. I've found that it helps to bend the tip end of this hair in as tight a bend as you can make it. And so I'm bending it with between my fingers there. You can see what I'm doing there. I'm bending it back on itself as tight as I can get it to bend. That helps before I start putting it in here. Of course, that can also create problems. It's making the hair pull through a little bit, so I'm going to trim off the long part of that and re-glue and reheat it. I'm going to put some more glue on the tip end of that. Just wanting to swell the ends of the hair up so they don't pull back through. Now that I've got that bent, I'm going to turn the bent end back towards the frog, back towards the other end, like this. The hair has got such a curl to it from being curled up for so long. It keeps springing out of my hand. Okay, I've got it bent up there pretty good. I'm going to poke it down in this tool here to help poke it down in there. While I've got it held in place, I'm going to attempt to poke the little piece of wood in there that was in there before and see if I can have any success. It's spun around on me. It's just not cooperating at all. The hair is very stiff. It's starting to go in there, believe it or not, which I'm almost having a hard time believing it myself. And I'm poking it down in there best I can. Just keep working at it. And it's going. Just barely going, but it's going. So it's nice to reuse those blocks if you can, and there was enough left of that one to use, no problem. Alright, now while I've got that held up there, there's a little bit of, and you got to really be careful here. You don't want to slip and cut your hair after all that work. I'm just cutting off any extra fibers or anything that's sticking up proud. That looks real good. I'm real happy with that. Okay, and now we should be able to bend the hair back down this direction, and you can see what you end up with. Now, before we go any further, we're going to comb this hair out and get it all straight and get all the strands straight and even, and then we'll work on the other end. The book I learned to do this from said to wet the hair down and comb it out. Well, I do want to wet it down eventually, but I have found it is much easier to comb out before you wet it. While it's dry, it'll comb about 3 times easier than it will after it's wet. So if you get all the knots out of it first while it's dry, then it'll comb real easy when you get it wet. See, it's already combing through, no problem, dry, easy as pie. If I had wet that down first, it would have taken me 15 minutes to comb through that. And I'm just basically trying to comb it out where it's good and flat. I'm going to take my little clip now and clip it on the end of here just temporarily while I go get some water. Should have already had that ready, but I didn't. Got some hot water there straight out of the tap. The way I'm going to do it at first is I'm going to wet the comb down, put the wet comb through the hair first to dampen it up a little bit. And I just keep doing that till I get the hair really good and saturated. Now we'll take and flip the hair over, keeping it flat. Now we don't want to let it twist. We move it over back to the other end now. And now we will continue to comb it a little bit. Bring our warm water down here. You can see that that end has puffed up a little bit as I bent it over. There's quite a bit of puffing in that area. So we want to comb all that out, flat and straight and square this way now. The idea is to getting all the hairs equal and level and flat. Okay, we got her about where we want her. I've taken the screw out of the frog again. I just have the frog sitting in the slot and I have it pushed to the front of the slot. That's very important. Now I'm going to take a marker and I'm going to mark this approximately 1/4 of an inch past the back of the hole that we're going down in. The hole's right there. We're going to mark it back here a little bit. I'm going to say roughly 1/4 of an inch across there. And that's where we want to tie our knot. Now this part becomes very tricky, and I'm sure I can accomplish making it look much harder than it should be. So now I'm going to have to screw up here and lay this down, which I don't really want to do, but I'm going to lay it down, put my little clip on it there, and get prepared. Again, I wasn't really prepared. I'm going to make another string here. We're going to do basically the same knot we did before. The difference is this time we're holding it kind of freehand. I'm going to make a slip knot in the end of this and leave a little bit of thread extra to hold on to at the other end, and I'm leaving a fairly large loop at the moment. Got my assistant here in the shop and holding this other end of the hair for me, which I wasn't expecting. I usually do this by myself, but since I have an assistant, I'll make use of it. Now, as I said, I take and make a loop here, I wrap this around, and I'm going to wrap it approximately 10 wraps. Alright, that's about 10. Bring it up here like so. The loose end of the thread is hanging back this way, and now I take those same loops, I try to keep it up here where I got my mark, and I start wrapping them back on themselves. It's much easier with an assistant, I can tell you that. I've done this many times without one. And then you pull this back up through, and you pull both ends there, and you slide your knot up right to your mark on your thread. Your mark on the hair that I had made earlier. And again, you pull these two knots tight as you can get them without breaking it, without breaking your thread. And then, as I said before, which is not necessary, I tie these back into a square knot. You don't really have to do that, but I've been doing that lately. It doesn't hurt anything, that's for sure. Okay, now we have our knot made. I can cut off the ends of this thread, and I can cut off the extra hair now. I cut it off pretty close to the knot, and then once I get it cut off, now I trim it real close to the knot. That's about as close as I can get, and I keep a death grip on the rest of this hair so it doesn't move. Coat the whole thread with the glue, and then put a little bit of extra glue right on the very end of the hair, and now we swell the hair up. And again, I get rid of a lot of that extra glue just by daubing it off of there. Put a little bit more glue right on the very tip end, just for safety's sake. Heat it just a little bit more. And now you've got a knot that won't come loose and the hair will not slip out of it. I've tried to keep it flat the same way all the way through here. I don't want this to twist because I've already combed it out and got it flat. So now this has to get bent down and go inside that hole. And the way you do that is I take this out, I turn it around, and you have to know how to do that and keep it all straight. See, it's like this. You have to keep it straight as you do that. It's complicated. If it was easy, monkeys could do it. I've still got the hair in the same orientation, but I turned this all around where I can work on it easier. I'm going to try to get the knot down in the bottom of the hole. I have a little hole drilled in this board where the frog is sitting down in that little hole there. Well, I almost did it. I almost put that on there without putting the ferrule on. As I've told you, that's what I always forget to do. And it's also, you have to pay attention to which way the ferrule goes on. It goes on with the rounded corners toward the tip of the bow. So I did it. I got it on there before I actually got this all put together, which I have done many times and screwed up. So at least I caught myself that time. Once again, I'm bending the end of this tight like so, and it goes like this, but I have to work on it like this. So I turned it over while I have it in there, keeping it in the same orientation. Then I set the little nut down in that hole there. Press this down in the bottom as good as I can get it. Then I slide the little keeper in there, the little piece of wood that they had already, and I push it down in there, and it went in funny. It didn't go in right. Tried to get it to go down in there evenly. Alright, it went in there, and now I'm putting it back the way it goes, and now I'm sliding the frog down in that hole, trying to keep everything level. Got it in there. Tighten it back up in my little vise here, put the slide back in over the top of the hair, and trying to keep the hair out of the slot where the slide goes so that it doesn't get crazy tight there. If you can do that, it'll go back in much easier. And it's almost in there. Take a little block of wood because it's easier to press. See if I can slide it in there without breaking anything. There, we're all the way home. As tight as it's going to go. Now we got to put that ferrule back on. And the ferrule's on there, though I can see a problem, a very minor problem. There's gook or something keeping the ferrule from going tight, so I'm going to cut that junk out of there, whatever it is. And again, I'm being careful not to touch the hair. There it goes. As tight as it's going to go. It's not going to go any tighter than that. That's almost done. Now we have to put a spreader in here to spread this hair out. Actually, there was a tiny spreader in there, but it was no good. So we will make a new spreader, and I'll show you what that looks like. I'm looking for a replacement screw. I found this one in my pile of stuff. And it looks like the threads would be right, except that the screw is just way too short compared to the old one. The old one's very long. This one's going to have the same problem, but the threads on this one look different anyway. Here's another old broken screw that just looks exactly like this one. Exactly. Just keep looking around here. This one looks like it's probably too short as well. We'll give it a shot and see, but I bet it's too short. Actually, it's just barely long enough, it looks like. But that'll be a problem because somebody will unscrew it and this will come out. Plus, it's not a very good one anyway. It's in bad shape. So we're going to skip that one. Well, I don't see many options here out of all the different parts that I have. It just doesn't look like anything is the same length as this one. This one is very long for whatever reason. Another old broken one here that's identical almost. Probably the same kind, and it's probably some inherent problem that they have. Well, what I'm going to try to do then is I'm going to try to machine a handle for this old screw and see what I can come up with. Before I go to the trouble of trying to make that part, I looked in my other new parts, and this is brand new. It's got its own little nut there and everything. It looks to be almost the right length, but it's a hair short too. So I'm going to just see what happens if I take this out of here. That doesn't want to unscrew either, so I don't know. It's tight. I'm sure I could unscrew it, but I don't want to create a different problem. I think it's easier if I just machine a new end for this. I think that's going to be the easiest option out of all the options that I have. Buying a brand new one like this isn't really going to solve the problem anyway, because this is actually shorter than this one, so I think you'd have the same problem as with those others. So here we go. We're going to make this. I'm into the dark side of the shop, over in the metal side. I've got a piece of aluminum chucked up in my metal lathe, and it's raining and thundering and lightning outside, so the rest of this video is going to be silent. I'm just going to show you what I'm doing to make the little handle for that screw for the bow.
It's in the wind, it's in the wind that you're leaving me again. There's no disguise.
I've got a knurled turned on the end of this little knob. I've got a hole drilled in it. Hole is about 90 thousandths, and the flats on this tang are about 90 thousandths, which means the corners are bigger. And so the corners are going to be digging as they go in. I'm going to put a drop of red Loctite in here, and then I'm going to attempt to squeeze this together with a vise. It should be locked permanently together then, especially after the Loctite sets up. I couldn't find my red Loctite, so I found the blue Loctite, and that's what we're using. It poured out of there, which I didn't really want. And now we will attempt to squeeze this together. And attempt is the right word, because who knows if it's going to work. Here we go. I'm already having trouble getting it to start straight. I don't know why. I thought it would go in there pretty easily, but it doesn't. There it's starting to go. I'm trying to do it slow so I don't end up bending the steel. It doesn't look like it's going to go. I thought it would go in there without any real problem, but it doesn't look like it. And I did bend the steel right there. Fortunately, I can bend it back. Well, I'm going to have to see what I can do about maybe heating it up, and maybe that'll expand it enough that I can push it in there. I'll try that. I'll try anything. Nope, that's not going to work either. Alright, well, I'm going to have to drill a bigger hole, that's for sure. The bad news is that took 10 times longer than it should have for me to press that onto the end of that shaft. The good news is it ain't never coming off. I guarantee you that. That thing will go through tornadoes, hurricanes, everything, and it ain't coming off of there. I guarantee you that much. Now, the only thing I don't know, and it works fine, works perfect, the only thing I don't know now is whether I should leave it silver or just paint it black. By the time this video comes out, that decision will already be made, so there's no point in you telling me to paint it black or to leave it silver or to paint it some other color, because it's already going to be done. I don't know. It doesn't look bad silver exactly. I wished I would have had a piece of brass. I could have just left it brass. I would have left that. I'm tempted to just go ahead and paint it black, just because I think it will probably look more original type thing. So that's what I think I'll do. I've got some black enamel paint, and I think I'll just paint it and see how that looks. Well, I painted it black. I don't know. I think it looked just about as good as silver. but it's black now, so there you go. Okay, it's time to put the spreader in this bow now. This was the spreader that was in there, and you can see it's pretty thin and wore out, and this one here is kind of the standard looking spreader that you put in there to spread the hair out. I don't know if this one's going to fit offhand. It just was one I had laying around here, and I'm going to take the bow out of the holder here and see if we can't make this work. You basically slide the spreader in behind the hair, between the ferrule and the hair, and like I said, I don't know if this is going to fit or not. I'd say this chances are slim. Seems to start in there a little bit, so I think I'm going to have to work on it a little bit with some chisels and things to thin it out a little bit more, flatten it out a little bit more. It doesn't seem to fit it exactly. I thinned it out a whole lot there. Seems to go in there a lot better now. And then as you put it in here, I'll show you what the backside looks like. You can see it going in, and then you spread the hair out. You loosen the hair as much as you can, by the way, and you spread it out, and you just keep working it down in there with the hair spread out. What that does is it not only spreads the hair out, but it also locks everything in place too. Now I'm going to take this little stick and push down on it a little bit better, because I can't really get with my finger on there. I believe that's got it. That spreads the hair out and gets it nice and flat. And now the hair is just about finished. This bow's still a little bit straightened out now from all that stress from all those years of being too tight. And it needs new leather grip on here. That's something I have never actually done, although I used to do leather work, so I don't think it should be a big deal. I just don't happen to have what I need to do that grip. This is probably the way it's going to go back to the customer at this point. It's certainly better than it was. Never really put a grip on a bow before, but I'm putting a grip on this one because it doesn't have one, and I've got some leather made specifically for that purpose. I've already got this edge glued on, and I've got it wrapped around and cut off to length, at least what I believe is the right length. What I'm going to do now is put the glue on the rest of it. Go ahead and get it around there using this glue that I use for binding, which I think will be fine. I just want to get good coverage, but I'm putting it on a little bit sparingly. I don't want to have a big mess. Seems to be going on pretty well. I know there's all kinds of fancy things that people do with these. I don't know, I've never done that before. I know they wrap the ends and do all kinds of fancy stuff. This is certainly better than no grip at all, and it looks like it's meeting up pretty nice. So what I'm going to do is just wrap something around this to keep it until the glue sets up let it set up for several hours. I believe we've got the fiddle up in good shape, good tuning. By the way, just take a look at how pretty it is now compared to the way that thing looked when it came in. Oh my gosh, it looks like a brand new finish almost. It's just amazing how much different it looks to me. And it's got a nice even sound. It's a nice fiddle. It's a real good old fiddle. We'll try a little bit of Maiden's Prayer. It's not one of my better tunes, which I don't really have any better tunes. So therefore, this is what you get. Quite a few flub ups in there, but anyway, you can kind of hear the fiddle does have a nice sound. It's a real good old violin. I would not be afraid to play that one on stage if I knew how to play one on stage. Thank you for watching.